So now I will start my 15 minutes reading practice from the book Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. It is no doubt, no doubt you have heard this story before. Marcus wrote a best-selling book about it, Lone Survivor, which became a hit movie starring Mark Wahlberg. But in 2005, that was all years away, and in the aftermath of the worst battlefield loss ever to hit the SEALs, I was looking for a way to contribute to the families of the men who were killed. It's not like bills stopped rolling in after a tragedy like that. There were wives and kids out there with basic needs to fulfill, and eventually they would need their college educations covered too. I wanted to help in any way I could. A few weeks before all of this, I would I had spent an evening googling around for the world's toughest foot races and landed on a race called Badwater 135. I had never even heard of ultra marathons before, and Badwater was an ultra ultra marathon. It started below sea level in Death Valley and finished at the end of the road at Mount Whitney Portal, a trailhead located at 8,374 feet. Oh, and the race takes place in late July. Oh, and the race takes place in the late July when Death Valley is not just the lowest place on earth, it's also the hottest. Seeing images from that race materialize on my monitor terrified and thrilled me. The terrain looked all kinds of harsh, and the expressions on tortured runners' faces reminded me of the kind of thing I saw in Hell Week. Until then, I would always consider the marathon to be the pinnacle of endurance racing, and now I was seeing there were several levels beyond it. I filed the information away and figured I would come back to it someday. Then Operation Red Wings happened, and I vowed to run Badwater 135 to raise money for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, a non-profit founded as a battlefield promise in 1980. When 8 special operations warriors died in a helicopter crash during the famous hostage rescue operation in Iran and left 17 children behind. The surviving servicemen promised to make sure each one of those kids had the money to go to college. Their work continues. Within 30 days of a fatality like those that occurred during Operation Red Wings, the foundation's hard-working staff reach out to surviving family members. We are the interfering aunt, said Executive Director Eddie Rosenthal. We become a part of our students' lives. They pay for preschool and private tutoring during grade school. They arrange college visits and host peer support groups. They help with applications, buy books, laptop computers, and printers, and cover tuition at whichever school one of their students manages to get acceptance, not to mention room and board. They also send students to vocational schools. It's all up to the kids. As I write this, the foundation has 1,280 kids in their program. They are an amazing organization, and with them in mind, I called Chris Costman, race director of Badwater 135 at 7 a.m. in mid-November 2005. I tried to introduce myself, but he cut me off sharp. Do you know what time it is? He snapped. I took the phone away from my ear and stared at it for a second. In those days, by 7 a.m. on a typical weekday, I had have already rocked a 2 hour gym workout and was ready for a day's work. This dude was half asleep. Roger that, I said. I will call you back at 900 hours. My second call didn't go much better, but at least he knew who I was. SBG and I had already discussed Badwater, and he had emailed Coastman a letter of recommendation. SBG has raised triathlons captained a team through the Eco Challenge, and watched several Olympic qualifiers attempt birds. In his email to Coastman, he wrote that I was the best endurance athlete with the greatest mental toughness he had ever seen. To put me, a kid who came from nothing, at the top of his list meant the world to me and still does. It didn't mean shit to Chris Coastman. He was the definition of unimpressed. The kind of unimpressed that can only come from real world experience. When he was 20 years old, he had competed in the Race Across America bicycle race, and before taking over as Badwater race director, he had run 300 miles races in winter in Alaska and completed a triple Ironman triathlon which ends with a 78-mile run. Along the way, he had seen dozens of supposedly great athletes crumble beneath the anvil of ultra. Weekend warriors sign up for and complete marathons after a few months training all the time. But the gap between marathon running and becoming an ultra athlete is much wider, and Badwater was the absolute apex of the ultra universe. In 2005, there were approximately 2,200-mile races held in the United States, and none had the combination of the elevation gain and unforgiving heat that Badwater 135 brought to the table. Just to put on the race, Coastman had to wrangle permissions and assistance from 5 government agencies, including the National Forest Service, the National Park Service, and the California Highway Patrol. And he knew that if he allowed some greenhorn into the most difficult race ever conceived in the middle of summer, that motherfucker might die and his race would vaporize overnight. No, if he was going to let me compete in Badwater, I was going to have to earn it, because earning my way in would provide him at least some comfort that I probably wouldn't collapse into a steaming pile of roadkill somewhere between Death Valley and Mountain Whitney. In his email, SBG attempted to make a case that because I was busy working as a SEAL, the prerequisites required to compete at Badwater, the completion of at least one 100-mile race or one 24-hour race, while covering at least 100 miles, should be waived. If I was allowed in, SBG guaranteed him that I will finish in the top 10. Coastman was not having any of it. He would have accomplished athletes beg him to waive his standards over the years, including a champion marathoner and a champion sumo wrestler. Yeah, oh shit, and he had never buzzed. One thing about me is I am the same with everyone, Coastman said when I called him back. We have certain standards for getting into a race, and that's the way it is. But hey, there is this 24-hour race in San Diego coming up this weekend, he continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Go run 100 miles and get back to me. Chris Coastman had made me. I was as unprepared as the suspected. I was as unprepared as he suspected. The fact that I wanted to run Badwater was no lie, and I planned to train for it. But to even have a chance to do that, I would have to run 100 miles at the drop of a diamond hat. If I choose not to, after all that Navy SEALs bluster, what would that prove? That I was just another pretender ringing his bell way too early on a Wednesday morning. Which is how and why I wound up running the San Diego one day with 3 days' notice. After surpassing the 50-mile mark, I could no longer keep up with Miss Inagaki, who bounded ahead like a demon rabbit. I soldered on in a fugitive state. Pain washed through me in waves. My thighs felt like they were loaded with lead. The heavier they got, the more twisted my stride became. I torqued my hips to keep my legs moving and fought gravity to lift my feet a mere millimeter from the earth. Ah, yes, my feet. My bones were becoming more brittle by the second, and my toes has banged the tips of my shoes for nearly 10 hours. Still, I fucking ran. Not fast, not with much style, but I kept going. My shins were the next domino to fall. Each subtle rotation of the ankle joint felt like shock therapy, like venom flowing through the marrow of my tibia. It brought back memories of my duct tape days from class 235, but I did not bring any tape with me this time. Besides, if I stopped for even a few seconds, starting up again would be near impossible. A few miles later, my lungs seized and my chest rattled as I hawked up knots of brown mucus. It got cold. I became short of breath. I became short of breath. I became short of breath. Fog, fog gathered around the halogen street lights, ringing the lamps with electrical rainbows, 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 which lent the whole event an otherworldly feel, or maybe it was just me in that other world, one in which pain was the mother tongue, a language synced to memory. With every lung scraping cough I flashed to my first birds class, I was back on the motherfucking log, staggering ahead. My lungs bleeding. I could feel and see it happening all over again. Was I asleep? Was I dreaming? I opened my eyes wide, pulled my ears and slapped my face to wake up. I felt my lips and chin for fresh blood and found a translucent slick of saliva, sweat, and mucus dripping from my nose. SBG's hard ash nuts were all around me now, running in circles, mocking the only black man in the mix, or were they? I took another to look. Everyone who passed me was focused, each in their own pain zone. They didn't even see me. I was losing touch with reality in small doses because my mind was folding over on itself, loading tremendous physical pain with dark emotional garbage it had dredged up from the depths of my soul. Translation: I was suffering on an unholy level reserved for dumb fucks who thought the laws of physics and physiology did not apply to them. Cocky bastards like me who felt like they could push the limits safely because they had done a couple of hell weeks. Right, well, I had not done this. I had not run 100 miles with zero training. Had anybody in the history of mankind even attempted something so fucking foolish? Could this even be done at all? Iterations of that one simple question slipped by like a digital ticker on my brain screen. Bloody thought bubbles floated from my skin and soul. Why? Why? Why the fuck are you still doing this to yourself? I hit the incline at mile 69. That 7-foot ramp, the pitch of a shallow driveway, which would make any seasoned trail runner laugh out loud. It buckled my knees and sent me reeling backward like a delivery truck in neutral. I staggered, reached for the ground with the tips of my fingers, and nearly capsized. It took 10 seconds to cover the distance, each one dragged out like an elastic thread, sending shock waves of pain from my toes to the space behind my eyeballs. I hacked and coughed. My gut twisted. Collapse was imminent. Collapse is what the fuck I deserved. At the 70-mile mark, I could not take another step forward. Kate had set up our lawn chair on the grass near the start finish line, and when I teetered toward her, I saw her in triplicate, six hands groping toward me, guiding me into that folding chair. I was dizzy and dehydrated, starved of potassium and sodium. Kate was a nurse. I had EMT training and went through my own mental checklist. That's it for the day.